I'm Mike Economist, chairman of the Social Studies Committee. And our guest today, I think it needs no introduction to us. Judy has been president of HASP and currently chairs the Humanities Committee. But she would like us to know that she received some of her lowest grades in college in American history because it seemed too focused on politics and war. And when it became could be focused on biographies of people, and she recently developed an interest in presidents and their wives. Judy has a BA from Hope College and an MA and a PhD from Ohio State University. So here's Judy.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to start the screen, but before that, as I'm doing that, I'm going to have a quiz early on in the first several slides. And if you'll hold your questions to the very end, that would be helpful. But I can ask you questions and you can give answers, and I'll tell you how many points to give yourself for various answers. So if you don't already have a piece of paper and a pencil handy, get that. And number down the left side, 1 through about 11 or 12, that should be the number of questions. And there'll be a column for your answers and a column then for the points that you can earn for correct answers. So with that underway, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we see the PowerPoint that we're going to have.
Looks great.
Okay. Welcome to the first of the HASP 2 classes about American presidents. And this class will be about the retirement activities of the presidents who lived long enough to retire. Return next week to learn about several significant presidents' wives and how they contributed to American life. We'll start with a quiz about US presidents who did not retire. We'll use the honor system to score points for questions you answer correctly. And I think at this point we can begin with question 1. This worked just great before.
Judy, oh, there you go.
Okay, maybe I just needed to click something else then. Maybe the first one. Okay, yeah, okay. First question, how many presidents, I've got to get my, I'm going to move my screen sharing thing out of the way so I can read my slides. How many presidents have served before our current presidents? First question. If your answer was 45, give yourself 1 point for question 1. Since the office of president was established in 1789, we've had 45 presidents. Joe Biden is our 46th president. So how many presidents have served before? Your correct answer would be 45. Question 2, how many presidents died of natural causes during their presidency? The answer is 4. If you have answered 4, you give yourself a point for question 2. Then, who were the 4 presidents who died of natural causes during their presidency? And try to get them in chronological order. And I'll accept the last name only if necessary. Who were the 4 presidents who died of natural causes during their presidency? The presidents who died of natural causes during their presidency, in chronological order: William Henry Harrison, Zachary Taylor, Warren G. Harding, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. For this question, if you Give yourself a point for each president that you correctly named, and if you named them in the correct order, give you an additional one. That would give you a total of 4 possible points. The first of the presidents who died in office, William Henry Harrison, Old Tippecanoe, died only 31 days after taking office in 1841. He insisted on giving an inauguration day speech longer than that of any previous US president. He gave the speech without an overcoat, hat, or gloves during a snowstorm. Afterward, a cold turned into pneumonia from which he succumbed. He was the president with the shortest term of office. Zachary Taylor died of cholera morbus, a 19th century term for stomach and intestinal problems. In July 1850, 16 months after he took office, he became ill and died after a fundraiser for the still unfinished Washington Monument. Some blamed the iced cherries and cold milk served on a hot day. Others blamed the water in the sewer system in Washington, D.C. William G. Harding, in the 3rd year of his presidency, fell ill in 1923. Most of his medical team, believing that he was showing symptoms of a heart attack, called for a cardiologist. Harding's head physician, however, insisted that the president had eaten some tainted crab meat. He gave Harding stimulants and laxatives and put him to bed, where he promptly died of a heart attack. Franklin Delano Roosevelt sat for what would be his last photograph on the day before his death by stroke on April 12, 1945, 3 months into his 4th term. The only president to serve more than 2 terms, he died at the Little White House at Warm Springs, Georgia, early in his 4th term. He didn't live long enough to retire, but he managed to find some time to relax by collecting postage stamps. In 1933, President Roosevelt fostered the idea of a set of 32 stamps honoring all the deceased presidents of the United States. The presidential series depicting the first 29 US presidents was issued in 1938. And some of you remember these stamps. I certainly do, from the 50s when I was collecting stamps like this. The half-cent stamp here honored Benjamin Franklin. He was not a president, but they considered him important enough that we would honor him with a stamp. And the 1.5 cent stamp is a picture of Martha Washington, the wife of our first president. And the 4.5 cent stamp is a picture of the White House. And in between, we have the presidents: George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Quincy Adams here. 7 cents was Andrew Jackson. 8 cents was Martin Van Buren. 9 cents was William Henry Harrison. 10 cents was John Tyler. 11 cents, James K Polk. 12 cents, Zachary Taylor. 13 cents, Millard Fillmore. 14 cents, Franklin Pierce. 15 cents, James Buchanan. 16 cents, Abraham Lincoln. 17 cents, Andrew Johnson. 18 cents, Ulysses S Grant. 19 cents, Rutherford B Hayes. 20 cents, James A Garfield. And then it jumps, well, the 22 cents is 21 cents with Arthur. Can we get Arthur in here? Yeah. Chester A. Arthur is 21 cents. Grover Cleveland, 22 cents. Benjamin Harrison, 24 cents. 25 cents, William McKinley. 30 cents, Theodore Roosevelt. 50 cents, William Howard Taft. $1, Woodrow Wilson. $2, Warren G. Harding. And $5 Calvin Coolidge. Franklin Delano Roosevelt himself was honored by a stamp. I just put it up in that the bottom right corner. The U.S. Postal Service honored Franklin Delano Roosevelt with a 6-cent stamp in 1966. Next question. Several other presidents did not live long enough to enjoy their retirements because they were assassinated. How many presidents died by assassination? The answer is 4. If you answered correctly, give yourself a point. Next question, question 5, I think we're at. Who were the presidents who did not live long enough to enjoy their retirements because they were assassinated? Try to put them in correct chronological order if you can. Who were the 4 presidents who were killed by assassination? They were Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy. Give yourself a point for each president you correctly named, and if you get them in the correct chronological order, give yourself another point. So you have a total of 5 points if you had them in correct order as well as naming them. Otherwise, give you a point for each last name that you have correctly. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth on Good Friday, April 14, 1865, while attending a play at Ford's Theater as the American Civil War was drawing to a close. The assassination occurred 5 days after the surrender of Robert E. Lee and the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. James A. Garfield was shot by Charles J. Guiteau, a disgruntled office seeker at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C. on July 2, 1881. After only 200 days in office, 77 of which were spent in intensive care, Garfield died. The final cause of death was not so much the gunshot as the doctors sticking his unsterile fingers into the wound in futile attempts to find and retract the bullet. Here we have up here, he's collapsing and someone's catching and calling for some Secretary of State gesturing for someone to help him. It looks like they have apprehended the assassin right here, and somebody with a cane is probably about ready to bop him on the head. But they're removing the assassin, and apparently he was tried and found guilty of that. William McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist on September 6, 1901. Leon Czolgosz approached McKinley in a receiving line at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, covering a revolver by his handkerchief. And you can see in his hand here a kind of wrapping of cloth, but he got very close to the president there, and he almost within inches, it seems. He shot McKinley in the stomach twice, and McKinley died of gangrene and blood poisoning 8 days later. All of us remember this, I think. John F. Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald on November 22, 1963. Many of us can remember where we were when we first heard of it, and it left an indelible impression on many of us. Kennedy and his wife are on a political trip to Texas to smooth over frictions in the Democratic Party between liberals and conservative Governor John Connally. John Connally is sitting in the chair in the car here, where I'm pointing to, in the rider's seat, and behind him was the President Kennedy and his wife Jacqueline. Traveling in the presidential motorcade through downtown Dallas, Kennedy was shot in the back, once in the back and once in the head. The fellow with a rifle managed to get 2 shots in a row, and he must have been pretty much a sharpshooter. And Kennedy was only 46 years old, having served as the president for 34 months. Next question. Which president had the shortest retirement period before his death? This would be a president who lived and retired, but didn't enjoy his retirement very, very long. Which president? The answer is James K. Polk. Next question. Which president, after suffering a debilitating stroke, turned many of his duties to his wife, while he remained in office? Which president who suffered a debilitating stroke turned many of his duties over to his wife while he remained in office? If you named Woodrow Wilson, give yourself a point. James K. Polk was ready for retirement when his term ended in 1849. He and his wife, Sarah, had bought and furnished a home in Nashville, Tennessee. On their way to Nashville, they traveled a loop through the South, participating in festivities in 4 states. In New Orleans, they attended a massive dinner in his honor. Like Taylor, he caught cholera. He partied in Memphis when he should have been in bed. Just 103 days after leaving office, he was dead at age 53. Of all the presidents who lived past their time in office, his time in retirement was the shortest. Woodrow Wilson, elected in 1912 and re-elected in 1916, suffered a severe stroke on October 2, 1919, leaving him paralyzed on his left side and with only partial vision in the right eye. Incapacitated for the remainder of his presidency, he delegated many of his tasks to his wife, Edith Bowling Galt. She determined what documents he would read and sign and who would be allowed to communicate with him. After completing his second term, he retired from public office in 1921 and died in 1924. One retired president barely managed to complete the writing of his memoirs within several days of his death. Who was this president? Many presidents wrote memoirs, but this is one who managed to complete the writing of them within several days of his death. I'll give you a hint. After completing his second term, he set out on a 28-month-long world tour to strengthen American interests abroad. I'll give you another hint. Known to have smoked as many as 20 cigars a day, he died from cancer which spread from his tongue to his mouth and throat. I'll give you a final hint. Who is buried in Grant's tomb? If you answered Grant after the first hint, give yourself 3 points. If you answered Grant after the second hint, give yourself 2 points. And if you answered Grant after the third hint, give yourself 1 point. Ulysses S Grant, after serving as president from 1869 to 1877, attempted to run for president again after Rutherford Hayes declined to run for a second term in 1880. Grant failed, however, to gather enough support to be nominated by fellow Republicans. 2 months after his presidency, Grant and his family undertook a world tour. President Hayes encouraged Grant to strengthen American interests abroad, and an unprecedented undertaking for a former president. I'm getting a buzzing sound here. I'm wondering if I turn my lamp off, it'll make a difference.
Judy, just so you know, I don't think we're hearing it on our end, or at least I'm
Okay.
not, which is at least good.
That's not me, so I'm turning my lamp back on. Okay.
I don't see anyone unmuted, but if I see them, I will go ahead and mute them.
Okay, I'm not sure what's causing this, but bear with us. It sounds like a bumblebee. In China, Grant declined to seek an interview with the Guangzhou Emperor, a child of 7, but he did speak with Li Hongzhang, a leading general. They discussed China's dispute with Japan over the Ryukyu Islands, and Grant agreed to serve as mediator. After meeting the Japanese Emperor Meiji, Grant made diplomatic efforts to convince Japan to make peace with the Chinese. Japan, however, having the military superiority, annexed the disputed Ryukyu Islands a few weeks after Grant left the country. So he was not a very effective diplomat. Facing severe investment reversals and dying of throat cancer, likely caused by his fondness for cigars, Grant completed his memoirs only days before his death. The 2 volumes proved to be a major literary work. With the promotional efforts of Mark Twain, Grant's personal memoirs became a bestseller. More than $450,000 in royalties helped to support his family after Grant died. The success of his autobiography inspired several later ex-presidents to do likewise. Which president was reelected after another president served an intervening term? I just unmuted and muted myself back again. It didn't make any difference with a buzzing sound, so it's not coming from my end, I don't think. Okay, answer to this question. Recognize this person? Grover Cleveland is the correct answer. Grover Cleveland served as president from 1885 to 1889, and then from 1893 to 1897. After Benjamin Harrison defeated Cleveland in 1888, Cleveland's wife, Frances, 27 years his junior, was reported to have said to a White House servant, "I want you to take good care of all the furniture and ornaments in the house, for I want to find everything just as it is now when we come back again." Next question. Which 3 presidents failed in their attempts to re-enter the presidency after another president's term? Give you time to get 3 presidents who failed in their attempts to re-enter the presidency after another president's term. The answers, there are 3, of course. First one, Martin Van Buren. Second one, Millard Fillmore. Third one, Theodore Roosevelt. They failed in their attempts to re-enter the presidency after another president's term. Van Buren ran as a free soil candidate. Fillmore ran as a know-nothing, and Roosevelt as a bull moose, a party which called for progressive reforms. I think perhaps the failure of their attempts is caused by the fact that they were running on not major party platforms. These are all kind of upstart parties that didn't last very long, maybe not more than a decade or even perhaps less. Free soil, know nothing, bull moose. At least maybe they were third parties, maybe they were weak second parties. I don't know the answer to that offhand. Something to research later. Theodore Roosevelt, after having served 2 terms as president, 1901 to 1909, ran in the 1912 election. While campaigning, he was hit by an assassin's bullet, but he didn't die then. The bullet lodged in his chest after penetrating his steel eyeglass case and passing through a 50-page single-folded copy of his speech in his jacket pocket. And this arrow points to where it seems they found on an autopsy, or maybe an x-ray, that the bullet was lodged in his lung. Roosevelt concluded that since he was not coughing blood, the bullet had not reached his lung. He declined to be taken to a hospital. His opening words to the gathered crowd were, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." He delivered his 90-minute speech as blood seeped into his shirt. He considered running for president again in 1920, but his health was deteriorating and he died in 1919 at the age of 60 with a bullet remaining inside his chest. One president resigned from office. Who was he? Hint. Before he resigned, his vice president had resigned because he had failed to report $29,500 in income. Another hint. Richard Nixon. The Watergate scandal, if you put Richard Nixon, give yourself a point. The Watergate scandal caused him to resign on August 9, 1974, in the face of almost certain impeachment. After his resignation with his benefits package, President Gerald Ford issued him a pardon. In retirement, Nixon wrote several books, including his best-selling memoirs, and made many foreign trips, several to visit with Chairman Mao Zedong of China. On April 18, 1994, he suffered a debilitating stroke and died 4 days later at the age of 81. Now we're going to switch back from all these, and now we're pretty much going to go through a sequence, excluding the ones we've already covered before. We'll have a sequence of presidents that I haven't already talked about, and we'll talk about their retirements. After commanding Revolutionary War forces, George Washington surrendered command of the Army to Congress and returned to Mount Vernon until he was elected president. 8 years later, he again relinquished power, even though many would have been happy to keep him as president for life. Retiring to Mount Vernon, he devoted much time to his plantations and other business interests, including his distillery. Nearly all of his other wealth was tied up in land or slaves. He declined to sell his slaves because he wanted to keep families intact. After the death of his wife, Martha, though, his will called for the emancipation of his slaves. And so when his will was read, that his slaves were emancipated. John Adams, after serving one term as our second president, retired to his farm in Quincy, Massachusetts in 1801. He sent a brief note to Thomas Jefferson wishing him a happy and prosperous presidency. Jefferson did not respond. After a silence between them of 12 years, they resumed an active correspondence until their deaths. On July 4, 1826, the 50th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, Adams died at the age of 90 years. His last words included an acknowledgement of his longtime friend and rival. Thomas Jefferson survives. Adams died unaware that Jefferson had died several hours earlier. Thomas Jefferson, after serving 2 terms as president, settled into private life at Monticello. He sold his vast collection of books to the Library of Congress. He also founded and designed the University of Virginia as a university free of church influences, where students could specialize in many new studies not offered elsewhere. Suffering from fever and refusing his physician's offer of laudanum, Jefferson uttered his last words, "No, doctor, nothing more." James Madison. When Madison completed 2 terms of office in 1817 at the age of 65, he retired to Mount Pelier, his tobacco plantation in Virginia, not far from Monticello. Like both Washington and Jefferson, Madison left the presidency a poorer man than when elected. His plantation experienced a steady financial collapse due to the price declines in tobacco and to his stepson's mismanagement of the plantation. After Thomas Jefferson died, Madison served as chancellor of the University of Virginia for 10 years until his death at the age of 85 in 1836. Like Madison, James Monroe served in the administration of the University of Virginia, beginning in 1825 after his 2 terms of office. Monroe's death his health began to slowly fail by the end of the 1820s. On July 4, 1831, he died at the age of 73 from heart failure and tuberculosis, thus becoming the 3rd president to have died on an Independence Day. Referring to one of his best friends, James Madison, James Monroe's last words were, I regret that I should leave this world without again beholding him. Madison. John Quincy Adams was the son of President John Adams, who lived long enough to see his son as president. After completing 1 term as president, John Quincy Adams was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, where he served for 17 years. Representing Massachusetts, he advocated against slavery and predicted the Union's dissolution over the slavery issue. He vehemently attacked the annexation of Texas in 1845 and the Mexican War from 1846 through 48 as part of a conspiracy to extend slavery. After voting a very loud no on a bill to honor Army officers who served in the Mexican War, he collapsed with a stroke on the floor of the House and died 2 days later. Andrew Jackson. After completing 2 terms of presidency in 1837, remained active in Democratic Party politics. He advocated the annexation of the Republic of Texas, which had separated from Mexico in 1836. He died at his home, the Hermitage, at the age of 78 of chronic dropsy, a fluid retention, probably in his lungs, and heart failure. Jackson has been widely revered for advocating for the common man. He was a firm advocate of the federal union of the states and rejected any talk of secession. John Tyler, who filled out the term of the short-lived William Henry Harrison, was the first vice president to succeed to the presidency without election. When he sought election to a full term as president, he failed to gain the support of either the Whigs or Democrats and withdrew in support of Democrat James K Polk, who won the election. An advocate of manifest destiny, Tyler signed a bill to annex Texas 3 days before leaving office. When the Civil War began in 1861, Tyler sided with the Confederacy and won election to the Confederate House of Representatives shortly before his death by stroke at age 71. He is the only U.S. president ever laid to rest, I'm gonna move my stuff, under a non-U.S. flag. Franklin Pierce, after serving as president from 1853 to 1857, expected to be renominated by the Democrats, but he was abandoned by his party. His reputation in the North suffered further during the Civil War as he became a vocal critic of President Abraham Lincoln. Pierce, who had been a heavy drinker for much of his life, died in 1869 at the age of 64 of severe cirrhosis of the liver. James Buchanan, after choosing to limit his presidency to one term, supported Democrat John C. Breckinridge's unsuccessful candidacy in the 1860 presidential election. That election was won by Republican Abraham Lincoln. Just weeks after Lincoln was elected, Southern states began seceding from the U.S., and the American Civil War started. He supported the Union, as Buchanan did, though newspapers accused him of colluding with the Confederacy. Buchanan defended his actions in a memoir published in 1866. He died in 1868 of respiratory failure at the age of 77. Andrew Johnson, as president, came into conflict with the Republican-dominated Congress, culminating in his impeachment by the House of Representatives. The first American president to be impeached, he was acquitted in the Senate by one vote. After his one-term presidency, he ran twice for U.S. Senator from Tennessee, winning in his second effort. On that ballot, with 5 contenders, including 3 former Confederate generals, he won by a single vote on the 54th ballot. This was not an election that was a popular vote through the states or anything. This, I think, was within one of the houses of Congress when they had to have a majority of some sort. But running by just one single vote on the 5th, think of how long that would have taken, on the 45th ballot. The only president to later serve in the Senate, he was felled by a stroke less than 6 months into his term. Rutherford B Hayes, after ending Reconstruction and removing Union troops from the South during his single term of presidency from 1877 to 1881, went on to crusade for universal education on behalf of African Americans. In 1887, he was appointed to the Board of Trustees of the Ohio State University, the school he had helped found in 1870 during his first term as governor of Ohio. Chester Arthur, like John Arthur, was a vice president who became president after the death of a president in office, the assassinated James A. Garfield. Arthur retired in 1885 after serving one term. He returned to his law practice in New York City, taking on few assignments because he was often too ill to leave the house. 2 days after he ordered nearly all of his personal papers burned, he died of a cerebral hemorrhage in 1886 at the age of 57. Benjamin Harrison, grandson of 9th President William Henry Harrison, served only one term as president between the terms of Grover Cleveland, Grover before him and after him. After Cleveland defeated Harrison's attempt for a second term in 1892, Harrison returned to his law practice in Indianapolis. From 1895 to 1901, he served on the Board of Trustees of Purdue University. He died at his home in Indianapolis in 1901 from pneumonia at the age of 67. William Howard Taft became a professor of law and legal history at Yale University, his alma mater. 8 years later, he was appointed to be Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. There he served for more than 8 years, clearing out a backlog of cases and making the High Court more efficient. Taft's weight peaked at 335 to 340 pounds toward the end of his presidency. He lost 70 pounds in the first year after his presidency and kept it off the rest of his life. Playing golf was part of his regimen. After the sudden death of President Harding in 1923, Vice President Calvin Coolidge was elected president in 1924 and served until 1929. A small government conservative, he was also a man of few words and had a rather dry sense of humor. He took daily naps. He died suddenly from coronary thrombosis at the age of 60 on January 5, 1933. Shortly before his death, Coolidge confided to an old friend, "I no longer fit in with these times." Satirical writer Dorothy Parker, upon learning that Coolidge had died, reportedly remarked, "How can they tell?" Herbert Hoover, who served 1929 through 33, lived 31 busy years after leaving the White House. From his suite at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City, he and 6 assistants organized international food relief, introduced a school meals program in America, led efforts to streamline federal government, and wrote numerous books, including a best-selling biography, The Ordeal of Woodrow Wilson. Harry Truman, upon completing his presidency, returned to Independence, Missouri, to live at the home of his wife's mother, a home that the three had shared for years. "I'm so poor," he said, "I don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of." In response, Congress in 1958 passed the Former President's Act, mandating a guaranteed salary, a small staff, travel funds, and a furnished office to retired presidents. Harry Truman was one of the featured speakers in Edward R. Murrow's radio program series called This I Believe. Here you see him seated reading papers, I guess. Here's Edward R. Murrow on the right and Truman on the left. He was also interviewed on television in Morrow's See It Now program, making him the first former president to cash in on this new medium of television. In contrast to many of his successors, Truman accepted no post on corporate boards and made no commercial endorsements or consulting deals. "I could never lend myself to any transaction, however respectable, that would commercialize on the prestige and dignity of the office of the presidency," he declared. Dwight D. Eisenhower retired to the place where he and his wife Mamie had spent much of their post-war time, a working farm adjacent to the battlefield at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, 70 miles from his ancestral home in Elizabethville, Pennsylvania. They also maintained a retirement home in Palm Desert, California. Like Taft, Eisenhower played golf. He also enjoyed oil painting and playing bridge. Lyndon B Johnson surprised the nation in March 1968 when he announced, "I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president." The following year, he went home to his ranch in Stonewall, Texas, with his speechwriter to write the book, The Choices We Face, to be followed by his memoirs, The Vantage Point, Perspectives of the Presidency, 1963 through 1969. He also made plans for his presidential library at the University of Texas in Austin, Beginning with 250 acres of land that he was given by an aunt in 1951, he bought enough land to create a 2,700 acre working ranch with 400 head of registered Hereford cattle. Gerald R. Ford was the only president to have served as both vice president and president of the United States without being elected to either office. In his retirement, he made appearances at presidential inaugurations and memorial services. He wrote his autobiography, A Time to Heal, and Humor in the Presidency. He joined the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank, as Distinguished Fellow. Like Taft and Eisenhower, he enjoyed playing golf. Often he golfed with comedian Bob Hope. You see him in a picture there with apparel of the 1970s, it looks like. Often he golfed with the comedian Bob Hope, a longtime friend, and Gerald R. Ford lived 93 years. Jimmy Carter accomplished more as an ex-president than as president. In 1981, when he returned to Plains, Georgia after his presidency, he discovered that the peanut farm, which he had put into blind trust to avoid any conflict of interest, produced a debt greater than $1 million. Instead of farming, he worked to set up the Carter Center, his base for advocating human rights. He traveled extensively to conduct peace negotiations, to monitor elections, and advance disease prevention. He promoted Habitat for Humanity. In 2002, he received the Nobel Peace Prize. On January 2017, at the age of 92, Jimmy Carter became the oldest president to attend a presidential inauguration. Also, he is now the longest retired president in American history, with more than 35 years in retirement and still counting. Currently in remission from a metastasized liver cancer, which had been discovered in 2015, Jimmy Carter made the news in 2017 with an article in the New York Times about the 3,852 solar panels that had been installed on his land where the peanuts and soybeans used to grow, the failed farm and that he returned to after his presidency. He, with his family, cut the ribbon upon completion of the solar energy project. These solar panels can power more than half of what Plains, Georgia requires. During his presidency, Carter had solar panels installed on the west wing of the White House, but his successor, Ronald Reagan, had them removed. About the newly installed panels, Jimmy Carter said, "I hope that I'll see a realization on the part of the new administration that one of the best ways to provide new jobs, good paying and productive and innovative jobs, is through the search for renewable sources of energy. I haven't seen that happen yet, but I'm still hoping for that." At age 95, Jimmy Carter was still doing hands-on work for Habitat for Humanity, helping build homes for the homeless. Jimmy Carter holds the record for being the president who has lived the longest. On October 1, 2020, he celebrated his 96th birthday with his wife Rosalind at his side. Together, they watched the local parade of floats and golf carts go past their home in Plains, Georgia. Both Carters wore masks as a precaution. See their masks against COVID-19. As recently as November 2019, he was teaching Sunday school classes to adults at Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia. He's written 32 books, and he remains a moral compass and a model for what our role on earth is. Ronald Reagan, after completing 2 terms in office, moved with his wife, Nancy, to California, splitting their time between a home in the suburb of Los Angeles and the Reagan Ranch in Santa Barbara. He planned his presidential library, the largest of the 13 federally operated presidential libraries. In 1992, he delivered a well-received speech at the Republican convention. In August 1994, at the age of 93, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He continued to play golf, however, and take walks. After living 10 years with Alzheimer's disease, he died of pneumonia. George H.W. Bush, upon retirement, moved back to near Houston, Texas, but continued vacationing in summers at Kennebunkport, Maine. For more than 5 years, he was a consultant for the Carlyle Group, a private equity concern with ties to the military and aerospace industries. In 1993, while visiting Kuwait to commemorate victory over Iraq in the Gulf War, he was targeted in an unsuccessful car bomb assassination plot. In retaliation, President Bill Clinton, 2 months later, ordered the firing of 23 cruise missiles at Iraqi intelligence service headquarters in Baghdad. On June 12, 2014, George H.W. Bush fulfilled a long-standing promise by parachute jumping on his 90th birthday. There he is, probably in someone's lap. His jump from a helicopter marked the 8th time that the former president had skydived or sky jumped, including jumps on his 80th and 85th birthdays as well. Prior to his jump, he tweeted, "It's a wonderful day in Maine. In fact, nice enough for a parachute jump." And here he is on the right with his daughter, Jenna Bush Hager, after his successful landing. They put him, I think, in a wheelchair for mobility purposes, I guess. In retirement, Bill Clinton created the William J. Clinton Foundation to address international causes such as the prevention of AIDS and global warming. In 2004, he published his autobiography, My Life. He has remained active in politics by campaigning for Democratic candidates, including his wife's campaigns for president in 2008 and 2016, Barack Obama's in 2008 and 2012, and Joe Biden's in 2020. He's spoken in prime time at every Democratic National Convention since 1988, except for 2020 when coronavirus curtailed large gatherings. George W. Bush, since leaving office, has kept a relatively low profile. He moved back to Texas and purchased a home in suburban Dallas. He wrote his memoir titled Decision Points. He made a public appearance for the 10th anniversary of the September 11 attacks. In 2016, he spoke and campaigned for his brother Jeb Bush in the Republican Party primaries. However, he declined to endorse Donald Trump in 2016 or 2020. He and Laura, alongside Bill and Hillary Clinton and Barack and Michelle Obama, attended President Joe Biden's inauguration just a few days ago on January 20. This is how a Washington Post cartoonist portrayed President Obama's Christmas in 2016 in the White House. Here we have some Republicans with a gas can, and Obama is about to light the tree called Obama Legacy. And the Republican elephants, one with a match in hand, says, "We're here for the lighting ceremony." Barack had his work cut out for him to preserve his legacy as a moderate, wise, and gracious president who restored American prosperity after the 2007-09 recession that began under George W. Bush. In his retirement, he was low-key and did not interfere with President Trump's violation of many of the presidential norms of office. He did, however, release a statement critical of Trump's withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Agreement. He wrote, even as this administration joins a small handful of nations that reject the future, I'm confident that our states, cities, and businesses will help protect for future generations the one planet we've got. He spent 3 years writing A Promised Land, the first of a 2-volume set of his memoirs. Obama's 768-page volume, which covers his first 4 years in office, shattered all previous sales records on the first day of sale in November 2020. It's well on course to become the best-selling presidential memoir of all time, and I understand that it's possible that that might be a book discussion this summer in HASP. In 2004, before his presidency, Obama had written Dreams of My Father, which covered his journey to adulthood, and it also was a bestseller. Former presidents Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, G.W. Bush, with their wives, attended the inauguration of President Trump on January 20, 2017. And here's Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, let's see, here's George W. Bush, here's Laura Bush, and let's see if I can see, I don't know who that other person is. Donald Trump hasn't gone gently. He needed some assistance. Who really knows what he will do in his retirement? Former presidents currently living as of January 2021 include Jimmy Carter, who's now 96, Bill Clinton, age 74, George W. Bush, age 74, Barack Obama, age 59, Donald Trump, age 74. If you're interested in reading more about presidents and what they did in their retirement, I recommend several books. These two are available at the Herrick Library. Brady Carlson's Dead Presidents, An American Adventure into the Strange Deaths and Surprising Afterlives of Our Nation's Leaders. And Citizen in Chief, The Second Lives of the American Presidents by Leonard Bernardo and Jennifer Weiss. And the Hope College Library and its curriculum area for teachers has this volume called Lives of the Presidents, Fame, Shame, and What the Neighbors Thought by Catherine Kroll and Catherine Hewitt. That's it. I'll bring us back to our stopping the shared screen. I guess I click, here we go. I want to get back to unstopping. Here we close this.
Looks good.
Okay, we're back at the virtual classroom. I'm back, everybody. I'll give you a few minutes to total all your many points on your quiz because we want to find out how you did. And we want to go in gallery view at this point. So make your screens go to gallery view. Looks like we got 55 people joining us. Wow. I'm going to take a few minutes while you're tallying your scores to look at all who's here. Some of you are blacked out because you don't have video or you prefer not to be seen. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see your hands if I'm calling to find out who got the highest scores, but we'll give her a try and see where we go on this. Maybe we can use the chat function for some of this. Give you time to do your scoring. Let's see. I'm going to ask those If you scored more than 2 points, raise your hand. Oh, I see lots of hands raised. Okay, that's good. Keep your hands raised if you scored more than 10 points. Oh, we got some. Oh, yeah, there's still some hands up. More than 10 points. Keep them raised if you scored more than 15 points. More than 15 points. I see Rick Burns' hand up. Let me see if I see another one. Anybody else? More than 15 points. I'm going to, I want to, some were waving your hands. John Cobes and his wife both have done more than 15 points. Let's see what we have. And others, some of you are coming. I can see you now. You're coming just to raise your hands if you want.
At the bottom of your screen, there's a reaction button, and if you're not,
okay,
you can just use maybe a thumbs up in your reaction if you don't have video, and then that way.
Okay, you can do that. Okay, let's go and see. We know we've got people that made 15. If you made more than 20 points, let's see if you would give your reaction. If you're one of the very few who made 20 points, I think there are a total of 24, maybe 25. If you had 30 points, you're cheating. So if you had more than 20 points, raise your hand and I'll see once we have any hands raised in the dark areas here. Let's see, I'm on screen 3 of 3. I don't see any more than 20. Any more than 20? I'm not seeing. Wave your hands if you're more than 20. I'm on my first screen here. Nobody raised more than, had an answer more than 20. Let's back it down to 19. And if you had 19 points, raise your hand and wave it. Or click your reactions.
I see a Rick Byrne.
You got one? You saw one?
I see Rick Byrne with a thumbs up on 19.
Oh, yes. Okay, Rick. Congratulations, Rick. You're one of them. And let's see if there's any more. Rick Burns. Rick Burns, may I ask you a question? Can you turn on your, unmute yourself? Because I want to ask you a few questions about how it was that you got so many points. Were you a history major in college?
No, I was an economics major, Judy, but I'm fascinated by history. Fascinated by history.
Fascinated by history. So you're pretty much a lifelong learner then. It sounds like you studied a lot of this and you've retained a lot of it so you could get so many points on this little quiz. Anybody else get, let's say if anybody had 18, put your hand up somehow, 18. I'm not seeing anybody. 17.
The Cobbs.
Where do we have?
The Cobbs.
The Cobbs?
Second screen.
Second screen.
Yep.
Okay, let me see if I can see on the second screen. Saw a comment. I'm gonna go back. Is Rick Burns related to Ken Burns, the history?
No S, Judy. No S. Can't, Judy. No S on the name. We emphasize no S on the name.
Oh, Rick Byrne. Okay, there we go. Rick Byrne. Thanks for the correction, Rick. Thanks for the correction. Oh yeah, sure enough, it's Rick Byrne. Okay, that answers somebody's question. Now, Rick Byrne, you're far and away the winner on this one, and the rest of us, we have learned a few things. Do you have any questions, anyone? At this point, just unmute yourself. I think I probably overwhelmed you with a ton of information, and but if you have questions or if you have a comment to make, anything that you remember from presidents' retirements that you want to share with the group, just unmute yourself and speak up.
Judy, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What are your feelings? I think that Hoover and Carter probably get the score for the most done after presidency. Is that good language with you?
Yes, I think so. I would agree with that. That's why I gave a little bit of extra emphasis to Carter at the end. Of course, he's the one that we're familiar with. Hoover, he was before our time. I probably
but a long time, but he did a lot of things for a long time after the presidency.
Right.
Though.
right? And I probably should have given a little bit more emphasis to Herbert Hoover for his long service. And serving on the Supreme Court as a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was an achievement itself, right? Pegran Grau asked a question: how long have you spent doing the research and preparation for this interesting presentation? I have to confess that this is I've been working on this for years. Back in, I would say it's been probably 4 years ago at this point, where HASP member, I don't know if she's still a member of HASP, Marilyn Cook, her husband Rich Cook was on the science committee for a number of years. The two of them were officers at Hope Church's Brim Bunch, which is a gathering of retirees that would get together for various programs, maybe 4 times a year, and have a supper together. And she asked me to do a program on presidents and what they did for their retirement. So I did that, but that was only a 20-minute kind of thing. And it just stayed on my computer and stayed on my computer. And then I'm a member of the curriculum committee, and we've made a strong request people to come forth with some program ideas that would work on Zoom. And a lot of people are thinking, oh, I want to wait until we can get together and then I'll have my presentation. I'll submit a proposal for later when we can get together. And so people like me on the curriculum committee have been looking and kind of lifting up rocks and doing all sorts of things to figure out where can we get some good presentations. And I thought, well, I'll lift a rock on this thing that I've been sitting on, this presidents and what they did with their retirements. And so I did, the one I did for the church was maybe about half this length, and it didn't cover all the presidents. I thought, well, let's say something about each one of them. And so I worked pretty much November and December putting the rest of this together. And it was a labor of love. I got a lot of information from books, the 3 books that I cited there. Also, I did a lot of, got a lot of images by simply going to doing Google searches and going to Wikipedia and that sort of thing.
Judy, we have a question in the chat. Are postage stamps still to be issued in the presidential series? Or still being issued in the presidential series? Oh, yeah, Judy, you're muted. Judy, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm okay. I've just unmuted myself. And to answer the question for next week, the following year in February, I presented it's called Brim Bunch, a Brim Bunch program at Hope Church on presidents' wives. I really wanted to follow it up with presidents and their retirements and then presidents and their pets. But one of the members of the group said, Judy, we'd rather hear about the president's wives. And so I thought, okay, I'll do that. And that's what you'll see next week. And that will have some videos with it as well. So stay tuned.
Wonderful.
Next question or comment?
There's a couple in the chat. I'm not sure if you heard
Okay,
what I said. Can you see the chat? I'll read them to you.
Yeah, I can see the chat, but let me open it up. I see one.
Okay.
Our postage stamps are still being issued in the presidential series. No, I think they pretty much stopped with that series that you saw, and what in 1938 it came out. But those stamps lasted a long time. They were still, you could go to the post office in the 50s, I know, and get them. But since then, there have been various other commemoratives that have come out for various presidents, and they're not anymore in the presidential series. It was just issued that one time in 38, and they just stuck around for a long time. Now we just have these forever stamps that don't have even values to them. And frankly, for stamp collectors, they're stamps, and I used to collect stamps, and ever since they had the sticky things that are adhesives that are a glue on a piece of paper rather than what you lick and stick, they've been a bear to get off envelopes, and stamp collecting isn't as fun as it used to be for American stamps. Next question. 1 year ago, I was at the Clinton Presidential Library in Little Rock. Highly recommend it. They have a place on the top floor where they stay when in Little Rock. And also their burial site is there. This would be for the Clintons. They've already pre-planned. They're going to go back. They're going to go back to Arkansas. Let's see. Anything else? Any other comments or questions? Anything that I forgot or omitted? Something pertinent fact about a president in retirement that you want to share with the group? Any single presidents? Yes. I think it was Buchanan. And there were some speculations about why he was single. And there were speculations that probably would have been inappropriate to talk about in the time that he lived. And I'll leave you to your speculations. He was a close friend of someone else, and I'm not sure. I'll try to do a little research on Buchanan for next time and maybe say a word about him, because he doesn't have a wife. The rest of them did. Any other comments or questions? Well, go ahead.
I thought it was amazing.
Linda, yes, go ahead.
I thought it was amazing that until Truman's time, there really was no provision for retirement funds for a retired president, and that he could really be in poverty before that. So I guess so many presidents had their own separate wealth that it, nobody worried about it. But that was a sad point.
Right, for people that didn't have wealth, like Truman, they were really in sad shape, and that's why, of course, they've got had some legislation and that made them so that they wouldn't have to advertise on television or become used car salesmen or something to raise money for themselves. But most presidents lately have done very well in their post-presidency in raising money for themselves. The Clintons with speaking engagements, writing books, and that sort of thing. They have. They really didn't need a whole lot of subsidy.
And then in addition, now the presidential pension is about $200,000 a year. So it is a substantial pension in my eyes now.
Okay, Linda, I'm sorry, I haven't picked up most of your comment on this one because either my connections is a little shaky or
well,
can go ahead.
I said that now that this has been corrected, the presidential pension for all of our retired presidents is about $200,000 a year is their pension base, and then they get an office and a lot of expenses in addition.
Wow, no wonder so many people want to be president. Any other comments or questions? How many presidential libraries exist? Good question. I'm going to write that down. I don't know, and I'll try to get back to you next time. How many presidential libraries?
It would also be interesting to find out how they're financed. Does the government pay for anything or not in the libraries?
Okay, how are they financed?
Has PASC gone to any of the Gerald Ford's locations?
Has HASP visited any Gerald R Ford locations? You'd have to ask somebody on special events. To my knowledge, I don't think it has. I think they're close enough in Grand Rapids, so many of them, that a lot of us with our families have individually perhaps gone to several of the the sites related to Gerald R Ford. I don't recall any HASP trips to the Ford Museum, for example.
Perhaps when we get
library. Does he have a library in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, perhaps when we get to travel again, we could do something like that, because that's historical for Michigan.
That's true. Speak to people who are on the special events committee and see once if you can line up a possible trip to something related to President Gerald R Ford. Okay. Any other comments or questions? At this point, then, rather than get myself a whole lot of extra homework by asking more questions, I'm asking for more questions, I think I'll let you go to enjoy the winter sunny day.